Hello, my name's Chris Whitton. I'm sitting here in my studio in southwest England. Today I've been recording with my 1989 Noble Cooley Star Series kit using my PDB Boa bass drum pedal that Bob Gatzen designed and sent to me very kindly, and also playing my 1920s Ludwig Black Beauty snare drum that I bought from Creative Music in about 1992. And when I left college after 4 years, I didn't really know anything about drum tuning. I didn't have any studio skills or anything. And I had quite a few disastrous sessions early on, sometimes with well-known record producers. Anyway, after a lot of missteps, I finally ended up with a well-known brand of Japanese drums and a 1970s Ludwig Black Beauty snare drum, which I used on all my sessions up until about 1987. Well, I knew at the time that the other great studio snare drum was the Slingerland Radio King. This was before the internet, eBay, and vintage drums were very thin on the ground in the UK. So I was on tour in America around 1987, and I picked up a copy of Modern Drummer magazine to read on the aeroplane. And I saw an article about two guys that were making a modern version of the Slingerland Radio King, and that was Jay Jones and Bob Gatzen. So at some point later in the tour, we ended up in Manhattan, and I ran down to Manny's or maybe Sam Ash, I can't remember. I found a Noble Cooley snare drum and bought it and brought it home, and that became my second main studio snare. The next thing that happened was I got asked to play with Paul McCartney. I did a few auditions. He decided he was going to do a studio album. So more or less the whole of 1988, I was in the studio with Paul McCartney, playing my Japanese drums, my 70s Ludwig Black Beauty, and my brand new Noble Cooley solid single ply snare drum. Towards the end of the album, people started talking about a world tour. And I was in a bit of a quandary then because I wanted to use the Noble Cooley snare drum, but it didn't feel right to play Japanese drums on stage without playing their snare drum. And as I say, it was before the internet and email and things like that. I think I was communicating with Noble Cooley by fax machine at that point. Maybe my drum tech, Adam, had phoned Jay a few times, or I spoke to Carol. And I remember saying to them at one point, it's a real shame that you don't have a drum kit because I really want to use your snare drum on this Paul McCartney tour. And Jay said, but we do have a drum kit. We've just made one called the Star Series.
Noble Cooley very kindly sent over a brand new Star Series kit they'd made in time for Paul McCartney's rehearsals. We started the tour in September 1989, and in December 1989 we had a couple of shows at Madison Square Garden in New York City. And I think that's probably the first time that I met Jay and Carol, Bob and Joanne in person. In February 1990, the tour was back in America and we had a couple of shows in Worcester, Massachusetts. We had a day off before the first show, so I borrowed a town car off the tour and took a couple of people with me, and we visited the factory in Granville, Massachusetts, and met Jay and Carol again, and Bob was there. The tour photographer Bill Bernstein came with us and took these great shots, and he still talks about what a great day it was.
Towards the end of July in 1990, we played our last shows on the Paul McCartney World Tour. I'd been with him for 3 years at that point, and I just felt like it was time to move on and find a new challenge. I had an American girlfriend at the time, and throughout most of the McCartney tour, I'd been living in America anyway. So I was basically just hanging out between San Francisco, Los Angeles, and also traveling up to New England to see the guys at Noble Cooley and stay with Bob and Joanne occasionally. I remember sitting in Bob's laboratory home studio and talking to him for hours about drum construction and design and acoustics and things, all stuff I didn't really understand, but I learned a hell of a lot from him over that period.
Bob told me that he and Jay had been working on a new drum kit for Noble Cooley, the Horizon series. It'd be a little easier to make than the unconventional Star Series single-ply kit. The Horizon series drums were perfect for my next gig, the Dyer Straits World Tour, which started in the middle of 1991 and stretched out way through 1992. Those drums that I used sounded fantastic night after night, but the tour itself was a bit of a grind, well over a year long, and towards the end of the tour I just never wanted to see another drum kit ever again, probably. So I eventually moved back to London and started writing music for film and TV for quite a few years.
The last time I spoke to Bob on the phone, he was so enthusiastic about drummers and drumming, and he was starting the Drumframe company, and he just sent me this Boa pedal to try out. And we sort of had drifted apart because at that point I was kind of sick of drumming and I wasn't really into the whole scene of drumming, and he was more and more enthusiastic about drumming. He was a brilliant guy because he wasn't so much a businessman as someone who was passionate about music, and even more than that, passionate about drumming and helping drummers improve their lot. And so I just want to say at the end that Bob has left a massive legacy in the drum industry. A lot of mainstream companies copied a lot of his ideas. The Evans drum heads, the tube lugs, single ply drums were pretty thin on the ground in the 80s. No one was making them. And so it's incredible the legacy that he's left. And unfortunately, he left us way too soon. So rest in peace, Bob and Joanne. I miss you a lot. And what an amazing impact you had on my life and career.